It was a bright and peaceful Saturday morning. The sun was shining gently and the streets were slowly filling with life. In a quiet neighborhood where the buildings were tall and beautiful, expensive cars sparkled under the sunlight. Inside, a luxury car dealership. Everything was neat, shiny, and polished. The windows were large, the floors were clean enough to see your reflection, and the cars looked like they belonged in a movie. Every car had style, power, and a price tag that most people could only dream about. This place was designed for the rich, the kind of place where someone in a suit walks in and is immediately offered a cold drink and a smile. But today, someone different walked in. Staff Sergeant Marcus Lewis, a proud and decorated black Marine, stepped through the glass doors. He had served his country with honor. He had gone to places most people only saw on the news. Dusty, dangerous war zones where bullets flew and lives were lost. He had seen things no man should see, and still he came home strong. Marcus wasn't loud or flashy. He was calm, focused, and full of quiet confidence. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Marcus had saved for years. He didn't waste money. He was careful and humble. But this time, he wanted to reward himself. After serving 3 deployments overseas, he had finally decided to buy the dream car he had promised himself when he first joined the Marines. It was a sleek, black sports car, powerful, bold, and fast. He had seen it in a magazine during basic training and told himself, "One day, that'll be mine." And now that day had come. Marcus wasn't wearing a suit or expensive watch. He wore a simple black hoodie, jeans, and clean sneakers. To him, that was enough. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He knew what he came for. But from the moment he entered the dealership, the atmosphere shifted. It was quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. A few heads turned. Some people looked at him like he didn't belong there. He noticed it, but he didn't react. He had faced worse looks in far worse places. 2 security guards at the entrance looked at each other and then followed him inside. Marcus walked slowly through the showroom, looking at each car with interest and excitement. His heart beat a little faster when he saw the black model he had dreamed about for years. It was even more beautiful in person. He leaned down to check. The interior. Soft leather, perfect stitching, the smell of new car still fresh. It was exactly what he wanted. Just then, one of the security guards walked up behind him. The man had a strong build, a tight uniform, and a voice full of control. "Sir," he said firmly, "can we help you with something?" Marcus turned around, with a small, polite smile. "Yes, I'm looking to speak with a sales rep. I'm interested in this model right here." The second guard joined, arms crossed. He gave Marcus a long look from head to toe and smirked. "This car isn't cheap," he said sharply. "We usually work with serious buyers only." Marcus stood up straight, still calm, still polite. "I'm aware," he replied. "I'd like to speak to someone who can assist me." The first guard shook his head. "Look," he said, his tone changing from cold to colder. "We don't want to waste anyone's time. Maybe try looking somewhere else. We have to ask you to leave." Marcus blinked slowly. For a moment he didn't say anything. Not because he was scared, but because he was trying to understand why, in this peaceful morning, when he was doing nothing wrong, these 2 men were treating him like a criminal. He had served his country. He had seen friends die. He had survived roadside bombs, gunfire, and chaos. And now, in his own country, in a peaceful city, he was being told to leave. Not because he couldn't afford the car, but because of how he looked. He wanted to explain himself. To say, "I'm a Marine." To tell them he had every right to be there. But something inside him told him not to argue. He looked at the guards again. They had already made up their minds. Nothing he said would change them. They weren't listening. They were judging. So without a word, Marcus turned around and walked out. He didn't shout. He didn't cause a scene. He walked slowly, with his head held high. But inside, something burned. He sat down in his old car outside the dealership. He rested his hands on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes for a few seconds. Memories of war flashed through his mind. Not the violence, but the brotherhood. The people who stood by him no matter what. The people who respected him for who he was, not how he looked. He pulled out his phone. There was only one person he wanted to call. Lieutenant Daniel Knox was more than a friend. He was a brother in arms. They had fought together, bled together, and carried each other out of fire. Daniel was a Navy SEAL, sharp, fearless, and loyal. If Marcus called, Daniel would come, not because of drama, but because of respect. The phone rang once. "Marcus?" Daniel's voice was alert, curious. "You busy?" Marcus asked quietly. "Not if you need me." Marcus explained the situation in a few short words. He didn't yell, didn't cry. He just told it like it was. How he walked into a dealership, got told to leave, and was disrespected for no reason. Daniel didn't ask for more. He just said, "Where are you?" Marcus told him. Daniel didn't hang up. He just said, "Give me 20 minutes." And just like that, Marcus sat back in his seat. Not to get revenge, not to start trouble, but to remind the world, gently, strongly, that respect is not something you ask for. It's something you stand for. He looked around the dealership from his window. Life continued. The guard stood at the door like nothing had happened. Customers went in and out. Nobody knew what had just happened. Nobody cared. But that was about to change, because when a Marine calls, his brothers answer. And Marcus's brothers were not just soldiers, they were SEALs. The kind of men who never forget what loyalty means. The kind of men who know that when one of their own is wronged, silence is not an option. The next few minutes were going to change everything. Not with violence, not with anger, but with something far more powerful. Dignity, brotherhood, and truth, because Marcus didn't walk away because he was weak. He walked away because he was strong enough to come back the right way. Marcus sat quietly in his car, looking straight ahead. Outside, people were walking, smiling, going about their day. But inside him, there was a deep silence. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that comes after being insulted, judged, and thrown aside for no reason. He kept remembering the guard's words. "This car isn't for people like you." The words weren't loud, but they stayed in his mind like a hammer hitting the same spot again and again. He wasn't angry in the way some people get angry. He wasn't yelling, shouting, or losing control. No. His anger was quiet, strong, and deep. It was the kind of feeling that made you think hard before doing anything. He looked down at his phone. The screen was black. His fingers hovered over it for a moment. Then, without much thought, he unlocked it and searched for one name: Daniel Knox. Daniel wasn't just a friend. He was a brother. Not by blood, but by battle. Marcus and Daniel had met during their second deployment. They had slept in the same sand-filled tents, eaten the same cold meals, and fought side by side when bullets flew overhead. They had seen life and death together. In those kinds of moments, friendships turn into something more, a kind of bond that civilians never truly understand. Marcus pressed the call button. The phone didn't even ring twice before Daniel picked up. "Marcus?" His voice was sharp and alert, just like always. "You busy?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but heavy. "Not if you need me." There was no laughter, no questions like, "What's up?" Daniel already knew something wasn't right. Marcus was never the kind of man to call unless there was a reason. Marcus took a slow breath and told Daniel what had happened. Every word was spoken with control. No drama, just facts. "I walked into the dealership," he said. "Wanted to check out the car I told you about, the one I saved for." Daniel was quiet, listening. 2 guards followed me around. They told me to leave. Said this place is for serious buyers. Didn't even give me a chance to speak. To a salesperson. Silence again. I left, Marcus said. A few seconds passed. Where are you? Daniel asked. Marcus gave him the location. Daniel didn't say, I'm coming or don't worry. He didn't need to. All he said was, give me 20 minutes. Then the line went dead. Marcus sat back in his seat and put his phone down. He didn't know exactly what Daniel would do, but he knew one thing for sure. Daniel would come. Not because Marcus couldn't fight for himself, but because Daniel believed in standing up for your people. That was something they had learned the hard way in the military. When one of your own is in trouble, you don't ask if it's worth it. You just show up. Far away from the dealership, Daniel hung up the call and stood up. He didn't change. Clothes. He was already in jeans and a dark gray t-shirt. He grabbed his phone and sent a short message to 3 people. Need you. No time for details. Meet me now. You know where. That was all he wrote. Those 3 men were all Navy SEALs. 2. They had served with Marcus. They had stories, memories, scars. One of them owed his life to Marcus, literally. During a mission, he had been trapped under enemy fire, and it was Marcus who had dragged him across a field while bullets tore through the dirt. He had never forgotten it. None of them had. Within minutes, the responses came in. On my way. ETA 15. Say less. Coming. No questions asked. Each one dropped what they were doing. One left a gym, another left a lunch meeting. The third was with his family. They didn't care. Loyalty came first. In less than 20 minutes, a black truck pulled up next to Marcus's car. Inside it were Daniel and 2 other SEALs. Another SUV arrived a minute later. 4 men stepped out and greeted Marcus with handshakes and nods. No loud voices, no jokes, just quiet, powerful respect. The kind that said, "We're here." Marcus stood beside them and explained everything again, but this time in a little more detail. His face was calm, but his words were sharp. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't touch anyone. I just asked to speak to someone about the car, he said. They looked at me like I didn't belong, like I was trying to steal something. The others listened. Every one of them could relate. They knew the feeling of being judged based on how you look, not who you are. One of the SEALs, named Ty, shook his head. You've taken bullets for this country, man. You've saved lives. You've done more for this place than those guards ever will. And they treated you like garbage? Marcus nodded. I don't want to fight, he said. But I want them to know who I am. I want them to see the kind of man they tried to push out. Daniel looked at the dealership. He could see the guards still standing by the door, completely unaware of what was about to happen. His jaw tightened. Let's go in, he said, but they didn't rush. They didn't charge in like a gang or a group of angry men. No. They walked in with the calm, slow, quiet walk of trained professionals. The kind of walk that says, we don't need to shout to be heard. The kind that makes people nervous without a single word. They entered through the same glass doors Marcus had used earlier. The showroom was still full of bright lights, shiny, floors and expensive cars. But this time, everything felt different. The guards immediately noticed them. 4 strong, serious-looking men, all moving together, with purpose. Their clothes were simple, nothing flashy, but their presence was undeniable. One of the guards stepped forward, ready to speak. Before he could say anything, Daniel raised his hand pointing toward Marcus. We're here with him, Daniel said. The guard paused. His eyes flicked from Marcus to the other men. Something told him this wasn't just a group of angry customers. Something felt different. He couldn't explain it, but it made him nervous. Marcus stepped forward, standing taller now. You asked me to leave earlier, he said calmly. I just wanted to speak to someone about a car. I was polite. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause trouble. The guard tried to interrupt. Look, Daniel stepped in. You don't need to talk, he said sharply. You already did enough. Just then a manager appeared. He had noticed the group from across the room. He walked over quickly, his face confused. Gentlemen, is there a problem? Daniel turned to him. Yes, he said. There's a problem. This man was treated like a criminal when he came here to buy a car. Your guards didn't ask for his name. They didn't give him a chance. They just looked at him and decided he wasn't worth their time. The manager blinked, trying to make sense of the situation. And who are you? He asked carefully. Daniel replied, Lieutenant Daniel Knox, U.S. Navy SEAL. And I'm not alone. The others didn't need to speak. Their silence said everything. The manager's eyes widened slightly. He could feel the weight of what was happening now. This wasn't just about a man being turned away. This was about who that man was, what he represented, and the people standing beside him. Marcus spoke again, his voice soft but full of meaning. I didn't come here to cause a scene, he said. I came to buy a car. That's all. The room was quiet now. Even the other customers had stopped to watch. Something was happening. Something real. Something powerful. In that moment, Marcus didn't need medals, uniforms, or loud speeches. He had something stronger. Truth. And brothers who would never let him stand alone. The next steps would come soon. But for now, just standing there, with 4 Navy SEALs beside him, was enough to change everything. The silence inside the luxury dealership felt heavier now. The manager stood frozen, looking at Marcus and the 4 Navy SEALs who surrounded him like an unbreakable wall. Everyone inside the building could feel something unusual was happening. Salespeople who had been busy talking to other customers suddenly stopped. Buyers who were admiring the shiny sports cars stepped back quietly, their eyes now on the group near the front entrance. No one was sure what was going on, but everyone knew it was serious. Marcus didn't look angry. He wasn't raising his voice, wasn't pointing fingers, but the way he stood, tall and proud, said everything. He wasn't here to ask for pity. He wasn't here to fight. He was here because he had been disrespected, and he wanted the people responsible to understand the mistake they had made. The manager took a breath and tried to gather his thoughts. His face changed from confusion to concern. He stepped forward slowly and said, Let's all calm down. I think we may have misunderstood the situation. Daniel took one step forward and said clearly, The only misunderstanding is that your staff thought a black man in casual clothes couldn't afford to buy one of your cars. They didn't talk to him. They didn't ask him anything. They told him to leave, like he didn't belong here. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a disrespect. The guards, now standing awkwardly behind the manager, looked uncomfortable. They didn't speak. They avoided eye contact. They had no idea who Marcus really was when they asked him to leave, and now they were starting to realize they had made a serious mistake. The manager raised his hands slightly as if to calm the air. I apologize on behalf of the dealership, he said, trying to fix the situation. If something was done improperly, we can correct it. Marcus's eyes met his. His voice was calm but steady. You can't correct disrespect with fake apologies. I didn't ask for special treatment. I only asked to be treated like a human being. There was a long silence. One of the customers watching from a distance whispered to another, Who are these guys? Another replied softly, I don't know, but they don't look like people you want to mess with. Just then, one of the salespeople, a young man named Ryan who had overheard everything, walked forward. He was in his late 20s, neatly dressed, and had been working at the dealership for 2 years. He looked directly at Marcus and said, Sir, I was in the back when you came in. I heard how the guard spoke to you. I just want to say I'm sorry. That's not how we're supposed to treat people. Marcus gave him a small nod, appreciating the honesty. Ryan continued, If you're still interested in that car, I'd be honored to help you. No pressure. Just want to do the right thing. Daniel looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded slightly. It wasn't about buying the car anymore. It was about standing tall in a place that tried to make him feel small. The group followed Ryan through the showroom. As they walked past the other cars, people stepped aside. Not because they were afraid, but because they respected something they couldn't explain. The way these men moved together, the calm confidence in their steps, the bond they clearly shared. It wasn't something ordinary. They stopped in front of the black sports car. It was the same one Marcus had admired earlier before being forced out. The car was beautiful. Its surface reflected the ceiling lights like water, and its design screamed power and elegance. Ryan smiled and opened the door. "Take a seat," he offered. Marcus slid into the driver's seat slowly, letting his hands move over the steering wheel, the smooth leather, the polished controls. It felt right, like a dream he had been chasing for years was now within reach. But it wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about a promise. A promise he had made to himself long ago when he was sleeping on dirt in a foreign land, thinking about what peace and success might look like when the war was over. He looked out through the windshield and saw Daniel, Ty, and the others watching him, smiling lightly, their arms crossed like proud brothers. Marcus stepped out of the car and said to Ryan, "Let's talk numbers." The group followed Ryan to the desk. The same guards who had earlier pushed Marcus out now stood still, unsure whether to leave or speak. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth had already spoken louder than they ever could. While Ryan started preparing the paperwork, the manager came over again. He still looked nervous, but now also respectful. "Mr. Lewis," he said, using Marcus's name properly for the first time, "I'd like to personally apologize again. We were wrong. You were treated unfairly, and I take full responsibility." Marcus looked at him. "Your people judged me the second I walked in. That's a bigger problem than you think." The manager nodded. "You're right. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. We'll hold a meeting, train the staff better. This place is supposed to welcome people, not push them away." Marcus didn't smile, but his eyes showed a bit of understanding. He wasn't here to destroy anyone. He just wanted the truth to be seen. And now it was. Daniel stepped in and said, "He didn't ask us to come here. He didn't want drama. He called us because we've stood with him through fire. And if he gets treated like trash just for walking into a dealership, we won't stay silent. That's how brotherhood works." The manager looked at the four SEALs standing beside Marcus, men who had served their country, faced death, saved lives, and now stood here, not for medals, but for justice. Ryan finished the paperwork. The car was officially sold to Marcus Lewis. The moment the final document was signed, there was a strange kind of stillness. Not because the sale was done, but because everyone in the building had witnessed something rare. The strength of quiet dignity, the power of unity, the beauty of real respect. Marcus shook Ryan's hand firmly. Then he turned to the group of SEALs. "Thank you," he said softly. Daniel smiled. "You earned this car a long time ago. Today, you just reminded everyone why." They walked out together. The glass doors closed behind them, but the memory of what happened stayed inside that dealership forever. Marcus stood beside his new car. The sun was still shining, and the city continued to move. But something had changed. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone who had watched him walk through that fire with grace. He opened the door, got in, and started the engine. The sound was deep, smooth, and powerful. It matched him perfectly. Daniel knocked on the window lightly. Marcus rolled it down. "You driving home?" Daniel asked. Marcus nodded. "But not alone. You guys following?" Daniel laughed. "Always." And so they rolled out. One sports car, two black SUVs behind, not just as a group of men, but as a family who had shown the world what loyalty, courage, and real strength truly looked like. Marcus drove the black sports car slowly through the city streets. The sun was shining bright, and the car's engine made a deep, smooth sound as it rolled forward. He wasn't speeding or showing off. He was simply driving, calm, steady, and proud. Behind him, two black SUVs followed closely. Inside those SUVs were the men who had stood beside him, his brothers, his fellow Navy SEALs. They didn't follow him to protect him. They followed because loyalty was something they lived by, not something they talked about. As Marcus turned onto a quieter street, he began to think deeply. The events at the dealership were still fresh in his mind. The stares, the insults, the way the guards had spoken to him like he didn't belong. It had all happened just a little while ago, but it already felt like a different world. That moment had started with pain and humiliation, but it ended with pride, unity, and justice. And now, as he sat behind the wheel of the very car he was once told he couldn't afford, he realized that something inside him had shifted. He parked the car near a small park and got out. The others parked nearby and joined him. They didn't need to speak right away. They just stood together in silence, watching kids play. People walk their dogs and families enjoy their day. It was peaceful, and it gave them all a chance to breathe. Marcus finally broke the silence. "You know, I didn't call you because I couldn't handle it," he said, looking straight ahead. Daniel nodded. "We know." "I called you," Marcus continued, "because I've handled a lot in my life. I've fought battles, I've faced enemies, I've lost friends. But today, when that guard looked at me like I was dirt, it reminded me of all the times we get treated like we're nothing. Not because we're bad people, just because of the color of our skin. And I couldn't just take it quietly this time." The others didn't speak for a moment. Then Ty, one of the SEALs, said, "That wasn't just about one guard. That was about every time someone looks at us like we don't belong, even after we've given everything for this country." Another SEAL, Jax, added, "I've had the same thing happen to me in restaurants, hotels, stores. I've even been in uniform and still been questioned. It never ends. But what you did today, Marcus, that was different. You didn't fight with fists. You fought with presence." They all nodded in agreement. Marcus turned to look at them. "I'm tired, man. Tired of proving I'm good enough. Tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. But today, something changed. And not just for me. That dealership will remember us. The people inside saw something real. They saw a black man walk in proud, get pushed out, and then come back, not alone, but with brothers who had his back. That moment taught them something they won't forget." Daniel smiled. "You made history today, Marcus." Marcus gave a small laugh. "I just bought a car." Daniel shook his head. "No, you showed strength without shouting. You reminded the world that respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you carry." The group stood in silence again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Then Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was a news reporter. He answered. "Mr. Lewis?" the voice asked. "This is Rachel from Channel 12. I heard what happened earlier today at the dealership. Several customers who were there contacted us. They said it was powerful. We'd like to interview you." Marcus was surprised. "Interview me? About what?" "About what happened," the reporter said. "About how you responded. People are talking about it. Social media is already calling it a powerful example of quiet courage." Marcus paused. "I didn't do it for attention." "I understand," the reporter said. "But I think your story could help others. If you're willing, we'd like to hear your voice." Marcus thought for a moment, then said, "All right, I'll talk. But I'm not going to attack anyone. I'm going to talk about respect, about pride, about being treated fairly." "Perfect," the reporter replied. "We'll meet you whenever you're ready." The call ended. Marcus looked at his friends. "Well, I guess this isn't just about a car anymore." Ty laughed. "It never was. They all laughed quietly. It felt good to laugh, after all the tension. Later that evening, Marcus and his brothers arrived at the news station. They walked in together, calm and collected. The station staff welcomed them with surprise and respect. It wasn't every day that four SEALs walked into a studio with a man who had just stood up against disrespect. The interview began. The reporter asked, "Mr. Lewis, can you tell us what happened today?" Marcus explained the entire story in simple words. How he had walked into the dealership, how the guards followed him and told him to leave, how he left without arguing, and how he later returned, with friends who stood by him. The reporter then asked, "Why did you come back?" Marcus looked at the camera and spoke from his heart. "Because I've had enough. I've worked hard my whole life. I've served this country. I've seen friends die in battle. And when I come home, I still get treated like a thief because of how I look. I didn't come back to start trouble. I came back to remind people that we all deserve to be treated with respect." The reporter asked, "And these men with you?" Marcus turned and smiled at his brothers. "They've been through hell with me. We've fought together, bled together, cried together. They're my family. And when I needed them today, not for war but for truth, they came without asking why." The reporter looked emotional. "That's powerful," Marcus nodded. "It is. Because true brotherhood isn't just about fighting battles. It's about standing together when the world tries to bring you down." The interview ended, and within hours, it spread online like wildfire. People all over the country watched the video. Some cried, some felt inspired. Some were ashamed of how they had once judged others without knowing them. Messages poured in. Strangers sent emails saying, "You spoke for all of us." Veterans wrote, "We're proud of you, brother." Young kids said, "You made me believe I can walk tall." The next day, the dealership released a public statement. They apologized, admitted their failure, and promised to start training all staff on respect and equality. They even invited Marcus to speak at their employee meeting, an invitation he accepted. He stood in front of their staff a few days later and said, "I don't hate you. I just want you to understand that every person who walks through your door could have a story you don't know. Don't judge by skin, judge by heart." The guards who had asked him to leave stood quietly in the back, listening with lowered eyes. They didn't speak, but something in their faces showed they had learned something important. After the speech, one of the salesmen who hadn't spoken earlier came up to Marcus. "I've never seen someone handle a situation like that," he said. "You didn't yell, you didn't threaten. You just stood tall. I respect that." Marcus smiled and shook his hand. "That's all I wanted." That night, Marcus sat in his new car again. He wasn't driving, just sitting, thinking. The car was beautiful. It had speed, power, and style. But what mattered more was the journey that led to it. This car wasn't just metal, leather, and glass. It was a symbol now. A symbol of standing up, not backing down, and proving your worth without shouting. He looked at the sky and whispered to himself, "I didn't do this just for me. I did it for every kid who's ever been told they're not enough." The wind blew softly through the open window. And in that peaceful moment, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Marcus sat alone in his car outside his small house, just watching the sky grow darker as evening settled in. The black sports car, which had once been a dream, now sat under the streetlight like a quiet symbol of something greater than just wealth. For the past few days, his phone hadn't stopped ringing. News channels, social media influencers, veterans, young people, even strangers from other countries. Everyone wanted to talk to the man who had silently stood his ground against disrespect, and who had done it without yelling, fighting, or causing chaos. But tonight, it was just him, the streetlight, and the distant sound of crickets. Marcus leaned back in the driver's seat and thought about how everything had changed in only a few days. What began as a normal afternoon, just a man walking into a car dealership, had turned into something he never expected. The video of his calm, powerful interview had gone viral. It was being shared everywhere. People had started calling him the Silent Lion. Not because he was quiet, but because his silence had roared louder than any angry words. The next day, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a message. A real paper letter. It was from a high school teacher in Georgia. She had seen the interview with her students during a life skills class. In the letter, she wrote, "My students come from a rough area. Many of them are told they'll never be anything. But when they saw your story, they looked at each other with new eyes. One of my students, a boy who barely speaks in class, stood up and said, 'That man walks like I want to walk one day.' You did more than make a point. You lit a fire." That letter stayed on Marcus's table for weeks. He read it again, and again, always feeling surprised by the weight of his actions. Soon, invitations began arriving from schools, colleges, even military bases. People wanted him to speak, not as a motivational speaker with fancy words, but as a real man who had lived what he was saying. Marcus had never seen himself as a speaker. He was a soldier, a team man, a quiet worker. But deep inside, he knew this was something bigger. This wasn't just about him anymore. The first talk he gave was at a local high school. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, no suit, no flash. The auditorium was full of teenagers. Some leaned back in their seats, arms crossed, thinking it was just another boring guest speaker. But the moment Marcus stepped up and began talking, something shifted. He didn't start with big, heavy words. He started with a question. How many of you have ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong? Hands slowly went up. Not all at once, but enough. Marcus nodded. I know that feeling. I felt it just a few days ago in a luxury car dealership. Not because I was causing trouble, just because of how I looked. He told them the whole story. From the moment he walked into the dealership to the moment he drove out with the car. But he focused on something deeper. I didn't stand up to prove anything, he said. I stood up because I was tired of shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. The students leaned forward. Phones stopped buzzing. Everyone was listening. He told them about the military, the times he and his team had faced danger, the nights without sleep, the friends he had lost, and how those experiences taught him not to judge anyone by the outside. When the talk ended, the students clapped, not because they were told to, but because they felt something real. A few even came up and hugged him. One girl with tears in her eyes said, "Thank you for speaking. Like a real person. You didn't pretend to be perfect. You gave us hope." After that, more talks followed. Each time Marcus refused to speak from a stage. He spoke from the ground, at the same level as everyone else. He didn't want to be above them. He wanted to be beside them. He became a quiet leader for many, especially young black men who had always felt unseen. He created a small program called Stand Tall. It wasn't a big organization with a lot of money. It was just him, his old teammates, and a growing group of volunteers. They visited schools, taught young people about respect, discipline, self-worth, and brotherhood. Not through lectures, but through stories, games, and real conversations. One day Marcus visited a youth center in a tough neighborhood. The boys there were rowdy, loud, and used to pushing back against authority. When Marcus arrived, they laughed at first. One boy shouted, "Who's this guy? Another fake hero?" Marcus didn't get angry. He just walked up and said, "You don't have to respect me, but I'm here because I respect you." That changed everything. By the end of the day, the same boys were sitting in a circle, sharing stories of how they'd been judged, abandoned, and hurt. Marcus listened carefully, never interrupting. And then, when they were done, he said something they'd never heard from an adult before. "You're not broken. You're just bruised, and bruises heal when you give them air." From That day on, many of those boys kept in touch with him. They called him Uncle M and texted him before interviews, after exams, or when life felt too heavy. Marcus never imagined that buying a car would lead to this. One evening, as he sat with his SEAL brothers at a small cafe, Ty asked him, "Did you ever think this is where life would take you?" Marcus shook his head. "Never. I thought I'd retire quietly, maybe teach self-defense, maybe fix bikes. I never thought I'd be helping kids find their voice." Daniel grinned. "That's because you didn't find your purpose. Your purpose found you." Marcus smiled at that, but everything wasn't perfect. Not everyone was happy with his rise. People accused him of using the car dealership moment for fame. A few even sent angry messages online, saying he was making racism look bigger than it was. Marcus didn't respond to those people. He told his team, "If we focus on the hate, we'll forget about the healing. Let the light be louder." Months passed. Stand Tall grew stronger. Marcus was invited to speak at a national event honoring veterans. He stood on stage, thousands of people watching, including politicians, generals, and activists. He said, "We can build stronger weapons, taller walls, and louder systems. But if we don't teach our children how to respect themselves and others, we'll always be at war. Not with guns, but with hearts." His words became a headline the next day. One of the final moments that proved to Marcus that his journey mattered happened a year later. He was back at the same dealership, not to buy another car, but to drop off a thank you letter for Ryan, the only salesman who had stood up that day. As he stepped inside, a new staff member walked up and said, "Mr. Lewis, right? We've all read about you. You changed how we work here. We now train all new staff to treat every visitor like they're a VIP, because you reminded us that character walks in many kinds of shoes." Marcus smiled. It was a full-circle moment. As he drove away, a song played softly on the radio. He didn't know the artist, but the words struck him deep. "You don't have to shout to shake the ground." He turned the volume up and smiled, because that's what he had done. He had shaken the ground by simply standing tall. And in doing so, he had lifted countless others with him. This wasn't just the end of a story about a man and a car. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a quiet revolution led by someone who believed that dignity didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be true.